fam? This is Kevin Duhart with the Yellow Tape Podcast, thin line between Christ and culture. Let's get into it. And I don't know about his parents or whatnot, but he's there at the playground. He's playing, and there's a mother there by the name of Shiloh Hendricks. And I guess her purse is out, and perhaps maybe she reached in her purse and grabbed something. And, you know, with a child who's on the spectrum, sometimes they'll mimic or mirror even certain behaviors. And so it's very possible that this autistic young man decides to go into her purse and grab something. Anyway, she begins to berate the young boy, calls him the topic that we're going to talk about. That she called this baby a nigger. Not nigga, but a nigger, the hard R. And she calls this baby this derogatory term. And there's a young man who's there. I believe he's of Indian descent. And this young man decides, hey, look here. You know what you're doing is wrong. You know, what you're doing is not just wrong, but that's evil. You are really berating a 5-year-old. You're calling a baby the N-word, hard R. And, man, she stands on business, as we say in our culture. And 10 toes down, she says, yeah, and proceeds to even call, if I'm not mistaken, the Indian brother a nigger. And, y'all, it's crazy. But that's not the crazy part for me. I mean, that's racism in and of itself is dangerous, right? It's dangerous for the one of whom the epithet is coming, and it's dangerous for whom the epithet is coming from, right? Racism is dangerous. Racism is violent. Racism is evil. Racism is ignorance. Racism is a gross sense of ethnic importance, right? Ethnic superiority. Racism is demonic. It's a demon. It's a demonic spirit. It's a devil. But this lady, not only did she stand 10 toes down, but this woman even decided that, hey, I've been, you know, people have threatened me, and I need to protect my family, and et cetera, because the clip went viral. And it's possible that people begin to threaten her. It's possible that people begin to say things about her. But when things went viral, this woman decided that, hey, I'm going to go to a website called Give, Send, Go, one of those crowd fundraising platforms. And last I checked, as of yesterday at least, she was at $756,000. Now, let's sit in there for a moment. A woman berates a 5-year-old boy on the spectrum, right? So he's not, you know, in the traditional sense, the average thinking child. There's some mental disabilities there, maybe some social autism there. I don't know where he is on the spectrum and where the autism impacts him. But what we do know is that it's probably 9 times out of 10 him not fully comprehending what he just did. And we don't have any record that he stole something she says he stole, but we know that he was definitely in her purse. But either way, she calls him the N-word. And I don't even think, to be honest with you, this 5-year-old is computing what's happening. I don't think he understands fully what's happening to him. He's, of course, in the video blurred out, which is what you should do for an underage, for a minor. But regardless of all of that, to raise $756,000, right? Because you cussed out a 5-year-old and then racially berated this child. It says a whole lot about racism. It says a whole lot about where we are as a country. And it says a whole lot about how lost we are as a people. So I want to kind of explore that, because this word, as I begin to read the comments and the commentaries and actually watch different individuals on social media or social medium talk a little bit about this child, I've noticed, or this situation rather, I've noticed a common thread of individuals who are either justifying, right, definitely critiquing and ridiculing and shaming, rightly so. But let's talk about those who justify. In the comments, I noticed statements like, you know, they all do that. It's about time white people stand up. And I was overwhelmed with the amount. I'm used to seeing, things online and comments, because most people who are racist online, I call it the new Klan, the new Ku Klux Klan, the new Klan. They still wear hoods, but it's digital hoods, right? We call them avatars. So they'll make a comment that's really crazy, but it's not really them, right? It's not their picture. It's an anime character. It's a lawnmower. It's a flag. It's a fishing pole. It's a picture of a lake, or maybe like an AI generated photograph of somebody else, or it's a famous person. And sometimes they'll use even a black face, like something demeaning or something like that, or maybe their favorite wrestler, right? Yeah, that's the new hood. It's the digital hood where you'll mask your racism behind a troll page. Now you have a real page, but you have this troll page that you get busy on, and you just hunt for anything that's going to impact black culture, so you can say something slick and smart. Most of the time, something you would not say to a black person's face. But anyway, as I was reading the chats of all these racist punks, these scared men, and I would even dare to say women, I noticed that there was a common thread that we need to stick up for ourselves, and we're tired of the violence of black people against white people, which, as it pertains to records and statistics, that's not really a thing. The way people are trying to make that a thing, it's not a real stat, right? Most crime is committed with communities that look like themselves. So if you live in an African American community, then it's going to be black on black crime. If you live in a white community, it's going to be white on white crime. If you live in a Hispanic community, it's going to be Hispanic on Hispanic crime. That's just the way our communities are set up, especially in a city like San Antonio, where I'm presently located, wherein it's a heavily socio-economically segregated city. All the money is on the north end of our city, northeast, north central, northwest, and north. The south, the east, and the west are oftentimes neglected. So in those communities where there's a heavy concentration of your hue, your kind, your ethnic group, your ethnos or ethnicity, that's where you're going to see majority of the crime is amongst each other. So black on black crime is just an issue. The fact that black people live with black people. And white on white crime is the same, or Hispanic on Hispanic crime is the same thing. So let's keep moving. So I want to unpack for a little bit this whole idea of the N-word, the word nigger or the word nigger, and why that's so impactful. Because I noticed in the threads, people were saying, well, y'all say it about each other, talking about black people. Y'all say it, y'all use it. How come we can't use it? And the real question is, why do you want to? Like, what is in you? Like, what's driving your psyche? What's driving your heart to make you want to campaign for your right to get beat down in most cases, or canceled, toe up, shot, killed, murdered, as the kids say, murked? Like, what is it in you that wants to be unalived so much that you will be willing to put your life on the line, or that of your family, or your job, your career, your education, your church, whatever that looks like, on the line, your community on the line, because you just have to say this? And so let's kind of talk about it. Let's unpack it a little bit. I'm going to laugh through some of this with y'all a little bit, because I think if you can make subjects a little bit lighthearted, it's easier to digest, but we're going to come to a sense of truth in a moment. So let's just I got some notes here. So if you see me looking down, it's because I want to make sure I'm saying things right. So the word nigger, right? Or the N-word is what I'm probably going to say going forward for a while. All right. But the N-word traces back to the Latin word Niger, right? It comes back. That's spelled Niger, which just simply means black. And it's not just in the Latin context where you get that Niger, but even in the Spanish context, you get the word Negro. In the Portuguese, it's also Negro. And then in the French, is noir, right? So these three words are basically all these four words rather. They all mean black, and these terms were used during the early modern 15th to 18th century. So the 1400s to the 1700s, folk were still were known as Negro if you were black specifically. As in European colonial powers begin their exploration and their colonization of Africa. So what we're seeing here is that before the transatlantic trade or during the introduction of the transatlantic trade, you had several superpowers at that time, quote unquote, civilized nations that wanted to colonize and expand their imperial enterprise or expand their administration, expand their territory for minerals, for wealth, for opportunity, to just dominate, right? That's what it really boils down to, is to dominate. And so they came to Africa. They came to Africa, a continent that is to this day. Don't let that map fool you. Africa is you can put America in Africa several times. It's that big. That map may shrink it, but Africa is huge. And so they would travel to the west bank, if you will, of Africa. Many of them went inland and began to help certain tribes fight. And there were certain African tribes that decided, like, hey, we're trying to expand and move into a certain part of this territory, and our enemies, other tribes, are there. And so they connected with many of these colonizers, i.e., Great Britain was one that was in the slave trade that was well known for that. The Portuguese, so Portugal was known for that. Spain, the Spaniards were known for that. And the Netherlands were known for that. I may be missing one. France is the other, the French. So France, the Netherlands, which is the Dutch, or the Danish, Dutch, whatever. Great Britain, right? The Spaniards, and Portugal. These persons were all a part of the transatlantic trade, which really started in the 1400s. And so in America, we have a later date in America, but it was already moving in those other areas. So the Portuguese would go to parts of Africa and poach the people in trade, in bartership. What they would do is they would connect with certain African chiefs, and they would, hey, we capture some of our enemies, you can have them, because they were trying to dominate, and would sell these people into what they possibly assumed was going to be indentured servitude for greed and for weaponry, money, coins, shillings, whatever, and weaponry and gold and resources, all that type of, everything, clothing, food, different types of food, maybe things they didn't have, whatever. But more importantly, to wipe out their enemies. That's not the case with every person that came, but that's how it initially started. Again, not the case with everyone, but that's definitely how it initially started until these slavers and colonizers stopped asking for trade and begin capturing and demanding, and it became business. For instance, the Portuguese would take folks from Africa and they would move them, these Negroes, to what we know as Brazil, right? The British would take them to places like Jamaica, or the French would drop you off in Haiti, people from Ghana, Sierra Leone, West Africa, along the Ivory Coast, Chad, Niger, all of these places, these persons were enslaved. They would drop them in these places. The British brought them to what we now know as America. And so I think the first slave ship arrived 1619, Jamestown, Virginia. And if you go to Jamestown, which I don't recommend you do, the museum for that is trash. If you want to know what happened, go to D.C. before Donald Trump pulls everything out, or J.D. Vance. Anyway, going back to what I was saying. So you had the Portuguese, you had the French, you had the Spaniards who dropped people off in Mexico, in the DR, the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, right? But even parts of like Panama, Cuba, all of these places, that was the Spaniards, right? I think I said Mexico. Like in Mexico right now, there's a place in Mexico that you could go to that was a black settlement. That were the people that there were Negros, and many of them during the time of slavery had escaped slavery in Texas and moved to Mexico. Anyway, that's a whole nother story. That's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, so this initially they were called Negro. They were calling them Negroes until things get adapted into English. And so the English adaptation of the term Negro was used from the 16th century, this is the 1500s, onwards in English to refer to black people, specifically, especially those of sub-Saharan African descent, and it was considered a neutral term, so the term Negro. So the question is, when did it become the N-word, right? The N-word. When did it become a slur? Pardon me. So the slur version of the word Negro, the N-word, likely developed in Southern American English dialects during the 17th and 18th centuries. This is now at the entrance of slavery in America, right? The 1600s and the 1700s, they began to slur Negro into the N-word. And it was used colloquially, but quickly took on a derogatory and dehumanizing tone during the era of slavery in the Americas. So I want you to picture this with me. You have a people who have been stripped of their native tongue, stripped of their native diet, stripped of their family, stripped of community, stripped of their religious belief system, whatever that may have been. I know that some say that many were Muslims, but many of them were not. Some did not have a faith, a mainstream faith that we now know as mainstream. But some were actually Jews. Yes, that's true. And some of them possibly were Christians. Please remember, the Christian church, before it hit Europe and became a part of the European expression, it was in Africa. As a matter of fact, your Bible has a gospel written by a man named Mark. And that guy, whose name is John Mark, took the gospel to Africa and established what we now know as the Coptic Church, which still exists to this day. So many of them possibly were Christians already. Either way, they come to the Americas. And when they come to the Americas, they are stripped of their tongue, stripped of their diet, stripped of their family, stripped from mothers, fathers, uncles, siblings, grandparents, stolen, and stripped from their communities, stripped from their culture, stripped from their homes, stripped from their continent, right? And brought to America where you don't know any of the languages and have never experienced any of the diseases, nor have you even seen any of these types of faces before, to be dehumanized and called a term that you will be met with on the boat in the middle of the Middle Passage, and then arrive in America where your name used to be whatever that African dialect was, and now your name is nigger. Your name is the N-word. Yo, that's what a way to dehuman a person. What a way to devalue, demean, dishonor, disrespect, destroy a human being. It's to dehumanize him with a word. And the snarling of the faces of slave masters and slave auctioneers and those who were preparing slaves to be sold on auction blocks right off the freaking boats. Nigger. Let's do that. Let's go there for a second. This nigger, this buck, you don't even know the language that they're sharing, but the first words, or some of the first words you hear constantly used concerning you before you learn English is the wicked, nasty language of European settlers who are dehumanizing people and using this phrase. Nigger. Let that sit. Let that sit. So it gets worse because the pronunciation changes. The N-word becomes embedded in the racial hierarchy. that justifies the enslavement, exploitation, and the subjugation of African people. And then there's the pronunciation, the distinctive hard R. Yeah, it gets bad. Well, this is all between the 17th rather, and the 19th centuries. So this is the 1600s to the 1800s. This is the time period of slavery. First slave ship arrives, 1619, I believe. But the institution of slavery is running from 1619, I guess, in America, the newly formed Americas, all the way up till the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863 in the North. And then if you lived in Texas, 1865, because the facsimile came here late. Let's talk about that for a moment, because you're talking about good old Honest Abe who freed the slaves. And I know we talk about that from the history context, but I read about him. And Abe wasn't that honest. I don't know where they got that from. I don't know where it comes from. The myth, right? The mythology. Because in America, we practice what they call revisionist history. We like to retell the story. Yeah. Like Christopher Columbus discovered what was already discovered. We like to retell the story. Actually, there was a man named Americus Vespucci who was here first. Actually, America has his name. Americus Vespucci was his name. We named this the Americas. Anyway, so that's a whole other thing. But the natives had it first. Let's keep moving, because I can go down a rabbit hole with that. So the Atlantic slave trade happens. The European powers and American colonies use racial labels to categorize people for the purpose of enslavement. And the N-word was often used in slave auctions, legal documents, and plantation records. Now, I'm a bootleg genealogist. I do bootleg genealogy for people all the time. I love genealogy. I love our history. I have such a unique last name. I always want to know, what does Duhart mean? And so it led me on a quest in 2005 to start researching stuff in my family. And, I am the family historian as it pertains to paper. There are those in my family that have met persons that are deceased, but I have names and dates, and I have the records because it's a hobby of mine, something I love to do. And when you do genealogy, you can only go back so far as an African American. Your genealogy stops in 1870 on record, because in 1860 we were slaves, our ancestors were slaves, but in 1870 we were free. It's the first time we show up on the census. Colored, black, Negro, whatever, depending upon your state or your county. But we show up in 1870. But before then, you're just a mark. You're just a mark. And so this N-word, I think I was talking about Honest Abe. Was I talking about Honest Abe, right? Okay. I'm rambling a little bit, but just flow with me, y'all. It's about to get gooder. So Abraham Lincoln, I know we call him good old Honest Abe. And, but Abe wasn't that honest. The truth of the matter is, the decree to free slaves with the Emancipation Proclamation was just a move for the war chest. It was a war strategy, a wartime strategy. Hey, if we can entice these slaves to betray their masters, we can shut down what makes them money, which is slavery. See, the South separated from the North because of money, resources, cotton, and slaves, because the cotton and the natural resources, the agriculture is how they made their money, and you needed slaves to do it because, God forbid, the owners of these plantations and their children could not do the job, so you needed people to work it, and they had slaves if you could afford it. Not everybody in the South had it, but if you could afford it, you had it. But it was enough of them to build this country for free. These N-words. And so what happens is Abe Lincoln decides, let me bankrupt the South. And I'll do this by saying, hey, you're free. You fight in the Northern Army. You fight in the Union Army. And if you fight for the North, you fight for the country, we'll set you free. If you survive war, we'll set you free. Give that man an opportunity and we'll set you free. Now, did they fight? No, they really didn't fight. The blacks really didn't fight. They were like cooks, and they get to the Northern Army, and, you know, some fought, but not all. I think one of the biggest fights was a platoon out of Boston, Massachusetts, that had black soldiers that actually fought. But many of the slaves did run away and go to war and tried to fight for their freedom. They did. They didn't let everybody do it. They wouldn't trust blacks with guns. But either way, it was a war move. It was a war move. Some of the writings that Frederick Douglass, things that was said from Abraham Lincoln concerning Frederick Douglass, almost called Frederick Douglass all types of names, for someone who loved black people. And then to take it a step further, you're talking about a man who even set up a country called Liberia, which is in Africa, which was named after a white man, James Monroe. It's called Monrovia, was established to send black people back to Africa. It still exists to this day. Liberia was invented by the United States of America, the government at that time in the 1800s. These are true facts, y'all. All right? And Abe Lincoln promoted it. Do your Googles. So let's keep going. So this N-word takes on all types of stuff, man. You had this thing even in that time with the N-word of what you call pseudo-scientific racism. This is in the 1700s and the 1800s where men began to create racial theories falsely promoting the superiority of whites that use the N-word as a label to imply subhuman status to black people. Pseudo-scientific racism. In other words, white people are superior. Black people's brains are smaller. White people's brains are bigger. Black people are incapable of having families. White people have families. Black people don't love their children. Black women can't care for a child. She needs a white woman can care for her child. Black men are incapable of having families. Only white men can have families. And so they would write books that proved that black people were inferior, not just in thinking, but in education, in speech, and also almost like my ancestors didn't have the ability to do anything without, like they were like little children that needed to be cared for by white superiority. This is what it was. That was the pseudo-scientific racism era. Now, if you're watching this and you're a little tense, you'll be all right. Take a deep breath, breathe that out. It's all a part of history. This is why I think it's important that we don't tweak textbooks, because we need to tell the story of what really happened so we don't repeat it again. But if you pull it out at some point, again, which is America's culture, we'll reimagine what actually happened. Even the term transatlantic trade, that softens slavery and the chattel of how people would channel like chattel through the Middle Passage. We should never forget words like Middle Passage and slavery, not transatlantic trade. That's just another new way of trying to make slavery sound conservative. Take the stain off the flag. Let me keep moving. So in the 20th century, after all these N-words, now we talk about the 1900s, you have the Jim Crow era. This is when there's segregation, black only this, colored this, no colors, no Hispanics, no dogs. I mean, it was very bad. This is the Jim Crow in the South. And the N-word is a common racial slur. So common that a president by the name of Woodrow Wilson, this is years after Reconstruction was ended, after Abe Lincoln was murdered and Andrew Jackson becomes president and Reed just completely kills the whole idea of 40 acres and a mule and just tears up Reconstruction. Woodrow Wilson becomes president many years later. And in the freaking White House, he has a screening of a movie called The Birth of a Nation, which was a silent film about the Ku Klux Klan and how they saved America from black men, the pillaging of black people, specifically black men. And the N-word is in the movie, in the silent film. It's there in the subtitling. You can see it. In the highest office of our country, This movie is screened there like a Hollywood premiere for the president. Take a deep breath, man. Breathe that out. It's the truth, y'all. You can't get away from the truth. If you get away from the truth, you'll repeat it. You'll repeat the cycle if you don't tell the truth. So these are racial slurs. The N-word is thrown around. There's hangings. There's lynchings. There are castrations of black boys, black men. N-word, 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 N-word. Lynching propaganda. Caricatures of black people, like minstrel shows. Even white actors, because black actors couldn't act in certain films back then. So white actors did this thing called blackface, where they would paint their faces black and portray wild stereotypes of black people with watermelon and chicken and slow talking and their hair. It's one of the reasons why, no matter how much people try to tell me The Little Rascals was funny, I hate that freaking show because of the buckwheat character and the Alf, all of the stuff with the hair. I hate that stuff. So black people over time, let's move on a little bit, begin to resist that term. And in typical black fashion, we did what you call the reclaiming and the recontextualizing of that phrase. This happens in the late 20th century, which is the late 1900s, and the 21st century, which we're living in now. It's the idea that we are taking the power away from those who use this phrase to dehumanize us, devalue us, dishonor us, disrespect us. We decided we're taking that power back from you, and we're going to use it as fuel to empower ourselves. So in the 1960s, 1970s, the civil rights movement comes along, the black power movement comes along, and African Americans now are reclaiming the word, changing its spelling from the ER to the GGA. And hip-hop, now hip-hop did not start that because you had this in blaxploitation movies, right? You know, you had it in the poetry, the black arts of that time. Individuals like Gil Scott-Heron. You had the Black Panther movement in the late 60s, early 70s. You had the movement of the Huey P. Newtons and the Bobby Seals and the Eldridge Cleavers, the Kwame Toures. You know, you had, again, just black thinkers, Angela Davis, black thinkers, black writers, black philosophers, and individuals who began to redefine what blackness was. Embracing, all right, and the funny thing about it, it's not a new thought, right? Let's add some Christianity to this. Back in the days, in the early Roman Greco period, when Christianity was just really starting to take off, we weren't called Christians. We were called the Way. Initially called the Way, and there was another nickname as well. I can't recall it at the moment, but people thought that Christianity was just another sect of Judaism. At the time, people were still going to synagogues, practicing this new thing, this new faith, this new conviction called Christianity. Before it was a religion, it was a conviction, a faith, a belief system, a set of values, right, about Christ. And so they called them Cristianos. It was a slur, a derogatory slur at that time that the way they said it, Cristianos, it was a slur, like a nasty phrase. Oh, here come the Cristianos. A real derogatory term in that time. Today, it seems like nothing. But in that time, it seemed like a big deal, right? Cristianos. So what happens is, pardon me, the Christians at Antioch decided, bump that, man. We're not going to let it hurt us anymore. We're going to own that. You want to call us Cristianos? Then we'll call ourselves Cristianos. And they were first called Cristianos at Antioch. Not Christians, we call it Christians, but Cristianos. So the phrase Christian is really a slur in its antiquity. Someone said, well, I'm not a Christian. Yeah, well, you don't understand the history and the value. That phrase for years was a slur thrown at those who were Christ followers. So they owned it at Antioch. Then fine, we're going to be called Christians. They flipped the power of a derogatory term on its head and called themselves that instead. Took the power away. So much so, most people today have no idea that that was a term that hurt people. Fast forward, African Americans like, yo, we're not going to let you just say whatever and it hurts us. We're going to own this. You know, my N-word. What's up, my N-word? And it wasn't a term of demeaning you because they took away the ER and added the GGA. Now, listen, based upon the generations, right, will determine whether that word is used. For instance, my grandmother is 91 years of age. I'm certain if there's a word that she would like to see extinct in our vocabulary, that's probably one of them. I'm sure you would agree. I'll go even further. My parents' generation, my parents were the first generation to desegregate or integrate their high school in San Antonio, Texas. In Texas, they were part of the busing systems where black kids were bused to predominantly white schools. For the first time, my parents were part of the culture that helped integrate as freshmen high schools in my city. That's crazy work, right? Because they're young. I'm younger than most people would think, right? That's crazy that my parents were a part of that. You see what I'm saying? My parents attend church with me. They look good. They young. They're only 70. Imagine that. They were part of the integration in our city. They might not like that word. They probably use it amongst the community, but as far as people outside of that context, no. And then another generation comes along and says, you know, guess what? We're going to take all the power away from it. And hip-hop culture, black comedy, black comedians begin to own it. Spoken word, poetry, adding acronyms to it. Artists like Ice Cube and Public Enemy, NWA, even Tupac's earlier stuff. Man, KRS-One, BDP, Boogie Down Productions, Poor Righteous Teachers. The list goes on, man. I mean, of black thinkers in music who begin to own it and flip that word on his head to take the sting away. I'm almost there. Watch this. And so, that's that added a sense of not acceptance of the phrase, but taking the power away and putting it in your face to the point where the culture begin to say, hey, we can't say that to them no more. Because if we do, there's repercussions. Ooh. They're so empowered now in their thinking. Before we could get away with it, but now I'll call you that. Our ancestors could say that, and they would shrink back. We said we might get hurt. We might lose our jobs. That's because of, I think, the flipping it to some degree. I'm not saying I fully agree with the thought, but I understand. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, how do you pull that word out of the culture? I have an idea, but I'll share that later. So this word began to spread so much so that now you could be in China or Japan, and there's some guys over there in Japan right now, I'm telling you, that are cornrolling their hair and in their own dialect calling themselves the N-word. What up, N-word? Is happening. In Africa, I was in South Africa. I saw it in South Africa. I saw it in the UK, in London. You're going to see it. You can see it in Mexico. You can see it in South America. You can see it probably in New Zealand, in Australia. Somebody somewhere, white, black, Asian, Jewish, whatever, is calling it, yes, to each other. It's a thing. It's a phenomenon. And so, so in most academic circles, though, there's a debate. Do we retire this word? How do we retire this word? Or do we keep this word as a form of resistance? What does that look like? Either still, that's the GGA. But the ER is still invoked in this culture, in this part of our existence as a country, 2025. We still have certain people who have black relationships who privately use that word. I'm going to go even further. In 2020, I discovered pastors that I respected who said things that got back to me, who were using those kind of phrases behind closed doors with black people in their churches. So anyway, this lady Shiloh does something that I think everybody who wants to say the word should do. Be loud and proud. Now some would be upset. Man, Kevin Duhart, why would you say that, Duhart? Why would you say that, Duhart? Well, because at least we know what you are. And we know who you are. Be proud of who you are. Because I'm proud of who I am and who I'm becoming. But you ought to be proud if that's in your heart. Right? Don't pretend to care about me and you really feel that I'm an N-word. Go ahead and empower yourself to say it. So at least we know what you are and who you are. Jacob Wells. So this lady, Shiloh, man, she does something very interesting. She goes to a crowdfunding website called Give, Send, Go. And I kind of want to unpack that a little bit because this specific website is really dedicated to, it's a Christian website. These are Jacob Wells, who is the CEO, and his sister. They are considered Christians. They're Christians. They confess Christ. He even said in an interview that one of the things that makes his website or their platform so unique is that they actually offer prayer for those who are setting up platforms, fundraising platforms on their platform. So they pray with their persons. They pray. They offer an opportunity for prayer. Can we pray with you? So it's this traditional evangelical Christian type thing, but they moved into the crowd fundraising space similar to GoFundMe. Let me talk a little bit about the CEO, though. His name is Jacob Wells. You learned something new, man? Good. Jacob Wells, the CEO of this, identifies as a devout Christian. Now, I just got this. I pulled this up. He prefers the term Jesus follower over evangelical. So he is a self-proclaimed Jesus follower. So if you're watching this in the comments, put that in the comments. Jesus follower. He says, I'm a Jesus follower. I prefer that over the term evangelical. He emphasizes values such as freedom of speech and religious liberty as foundational to his platform. And Wells has expressed concern that terms like Christian nationalism are used to denigrate Christianity in general. Though he acknowledges the United States, Judeo-Christian underpinning, whatever. We call America, well, some call America a Christian nation. My challenge is that it's a nation with Christians in it. Because of her introduction to the world, you took her from a people, number one. Number two, you enslaved a people, that's number two. And number three, you never made it right for any of those people that you either pillaged, raped, and stole their land from, nor the Africans you stole and raped and pillaged in this country, both of which built this joint for free. Never a public apology, never a proclamation, never a day of atonement from the highest office or highest seat of our country. Nothing. Not a reparation, not an apology. Get past it. It's over. So this guy, Jacob, says, hey, I consider myself a Jesus follower, and he owns this. Give, Send, Go, his organization, has faced a lot of criticism for hosting fundraising campaigns that are linked to far-right extremists, including neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and hate groups. Now, this is a simple Google study. Even the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, reported that between 2016 and 2022, extremists raised over $6.2 million on crowdfunding sites with Give, Send, Go accounting. Watch this, for $5.4 million of that total. Now, what does that mean to you and I? That means $800,000 of the 6.2 that was raised by supremacists between those times. Only 800,000 was raised on other sites. So for a Christian site 5.4 million of the entire 6.2 million raised on these crowdfunding sites. 5.4 of that came from a Christian site. 4 far-right, neo-Nazis, extremists, hate groups, and white supremacists. The platform hosted 230 of the 324 extremist-linked campaigns identified by the ADL. Y'all, that's ridiculous. This is a Jesus follower site. He's the CEO. They asked Jacob, they said, hey, man, what are some of the things that are non-negotiables for you? He's like, oh, no, we have certain values. Anybody just coming on our site to raise money to support abortionists and abortion, no. And anything that comes on there to defend or try to raise money for trans, what do you call it, where people are transitions for children, we believe in defending young people and speaking for the voices. Here's my problem with that. Shiloh comes to their website, opens up a crowdfunding campaign. She's raised $756,000, almost $800,000 for hatred, for cussing out and berating and calling the N-word to a 5-year-old black kid on the spectrum, autistic. What about his voice? It's possible the boy might not be able to speak for himself. What about his voice? Since we're protecting kids, Jacob, what about his voice? Jacob Wells, what about his voice? You're a Christian. What about his voice? At some point, when do we stop financing hate? Let's keep going. What other hosting controversial things do Give? I was like asking myself a question like, so Give Send Go has a CEO that's a Christian, but he's got this kind of crazy stuff. Let me dig into some of this. Who are these people? Number one, Kyle Rittenhouse. Remember him? For those that don't know, Kyle Rittenhouse is that young man that was still in his teens, I believe, that had left where he lived and drove to Kenosha, Wisconsin during the time of the riots that were happening. Contrary to popular belief, the BLM riots, majority of those people were not black. I'm going to say this for the mic. Majority of the people rioting and burning up stuff were not black. I know you want to believe that, but the videos and the stats tell you that they were not African American. Majority of these people are not black. Now, the looting part, the taking stuff, absolutely. Once it opens, folk gonna take it. You seen that. But the burnings and all that, everybody wasn't black. So let's not do that. Now, I want to be honest with you. I do not like and respect or have any honor for the BLM movement. I felt like the Black Lives Matter movement in itself, the movement with the persons who invented it, I felt like it was divisive, and I felt like it had an ulterior motive. And the ulterior motive was to support the LGBTQ plus community. That is something I wasn't for. Those resources did not go to where they were supposed to go in every case. None of it should have went to a trans community. I remember going downtown to one of the Black Lives Matter's rallies because it was just the height of COVID and George Floyd has went through what he went through, and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, and as a black pastor who's in a black communities right outside of our door, I wanted to see how we could bring peace and calm to God's people, especially those who look like me, because they were upset. While I'm marching downtown San Antonio, the leader yells out, "Black Lives Matter," and we're walking, "Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter." And then he says, "Black queer lives matter." I was like, "Black Lives Matter, wait a minute, what?" Because then he said, "Black trans lives matter." I'm trying to figure out, wait a minute, is something I don't know? Is George Floyd trans? Is Ahmaud Arbery queer? Hey, what the heck are we talking about? That's when I knew this is not the right motive. So I'm not advocating for them, but I am saying that Kyle Rittenhouse drove his butt to this rally and shot and killed 2 people with an AR-15. Where in God's green earth can you leave your house, drive to another city that you're not from, shoot 2 people because they see you with an AR-15 and you can justify that and celebrate it. Kyle Rittenhouse went to Give, Send, Go, this Christian organization, and he raised $250,000. He did. He raised it on this platform. You can find that on the Daily Beast. The Proud Boys, remember them? The Proud Boys during the first term of Trump, they came to power. Proud Boys, stand down, stand back, and stand by. Proud Boys, stand by and stand back. Stand back, stand by. Remember that? Proud Boys? Remember the Proud Boys? Remember that? If I'm not mistaken, they may have been the ones with the tiki torches. That was a part of the person who ran. I mean, anyway, stand by and stand down, you know. And so Proud Boys, well, they went to this platform. Remember, they had a chairman, Enrique Tarrio. And in January 2021, he went there to raise money for his defense fund. And this guy's crazy. And he amassed $113,000 in just 4 days on the Christian website. And the Proud Boys teach and preach hate. We ain't done there. There was another controversial one. In 2022, the Canadian Freedom Convoy that protested against all COVID-19 mandates. We don't believe in masks. We don't believe in vaccines. We don't believe in being healthy. We don't believe in 6 feet distancing. We don't believe. It was against it. And that's your prerogative. That's your right, right? Some of that stuff was a fugazi, but people died. People died. People lost their lives. They lost their lives. Millions died in America. Millions. People that I love dearly lost their family members, lost their mothers, their fathers, lost people that I care about, people that I'm in relationship with, lost people. So it was real. It was real. It really did happen. But the Canadian convoy, trucker convoy, protested against it, and etc. And went to this particular website with misinformation and raised $9 million on Gives, a Christian organization. Y'all, do you know the reason why they said we should social distance and wear masks? Number one, they didn't know how to get a handle on some of that. And in communities where there's lack of Wi-Fi, especially elder communities, where they don't have the Wi-Fi, right? There's no internet. So information is hard to get to. Good information, right information, right? Marginalized communities, disenfranchised communities, oppressed communities, communities that are overlooked in cities, where the socioeconomic factors there. These communities that were vulnerable were getting misinformation. $9 million. Yeah. There was a data breach in 2022, and that data breach showed everybody that this company had gave money to incredible far-right groups and racist groups. It was crazy. But here's the good news. Companies like PayPal saw that this Christian organization, so-called Christian organization, Give, Send, Go, PayPal said, we're not fooling with them. And we're not fooling with them because, watch this, they helped raise money for the January 6th folk. So the people that ran into the Capitol building for January 6th, they raised money for them. PayPal said, we're not doing that. Discover, Discover, MasterCard. Discover said, we're not in relationship with you. We're blocking that. We're not doing none of that. So there were different entities that say, hey, we don't want no parts of that. And most recently, because there'll be somebody who goes and look what I'm saying, fact check me. I'll say it for you. Most recently, young black kid, a teenager, 17 years old, reportedly stabs a young white kid named Austin Metcalf in Frisco, Texas, at a track meet. He's underneath their tent. It's raining. He's underneath their tent. And they get into a discussion. He said, they asked me to move. That's one account, but all of the stuff is going to come out soon. This particular Give, Send, Go platform is how he raised money for his defense fund. Let me argue that for a moment. In America, everybody's entitled to a defense, a right to trial. Everybody is. The bond normally for that case was about $250,000. His was raised to $1 million. To show it wasn't biased, a black judge set it at $1 million, which was higher than what most people get. So they lowered it down for his age and whatnot to back where it was supposed to be, which is $250,000. It wasn't a favor. It was just what is the legal precedent. The family did not take the money and spend it on a new mansion and renting out mansions and buy cars. That was all a lie from people online who want to stoke, even certain black folks who want to stoke stoke more of this hatred and division. What happened was an atrocity. That young boy, Austin Metcalf, should still be alive, period. There's no reason to kill anybody. If you want to fight, fight. Stabbing, no go. No bueno. But we don't know the facts. We don't know the story. He said self-defense. We got to figure that out in trial. This is the system America put together. We need to honor that system. So even he raised money on this. Here's the difference, though. The CEO actually came out and said he didn't care for this situation, but they had a right to do it. Well, but you care, but you have nothing to say about the others? You're a Christian, man. You're a believer. So this young lady gets on this platform. Jacob Wells and his sister Heather Wilson started and has raised $756,000. That's $756, almost $1 million, $250,000, more than $250,000, more than $750,000 was raised by people who agreed that it was okay to call a black baby a nigger. And not just any black baby, a young boy on the spectrum, autistic. Going back to a question I asked earlier. As believers, if you know that if I say a thing to you, it's going to hurt you, and I call myself a Christian, why would I want to do that? If the phrase stupid hurts your feelings, why would I call you that as a believer? In every ethnic group, there are words, derogatory words that are used or have been used historically that offends that ethnic group. I know you all agree, whether you're in the Hispanic community, the Jewish community, Irish community, the Scottish community, the Hispanic community. There are words and terms that are used that are harmful, that hurt, that sting. And in those same communities, there are words that are used that formerly stung coming from this group that may not sting as bad coming from within. And then there are words that were used that are proud, like, for instance, the word cracker. You got Cracker Barrel. It's not, some folks even own the term. Shoot, I'm a cracker, It is what it is. In the African American community, the stripping away of the pain was that is to flip that word upside down. It's the logic that was used. It's the logic that's in the culture. The only ask that black people have is, don't say that to me. We may say it to each other, but we don't have the same meaning you had. And it's not the same pronunciation neither. All we're asking is, don't use none of that. My question is, why is that so difficult? What is it in you that will make you want to say that unless you are a bona fide racist? Here's the beautiful part of America, freedom of speech. You can say whatever you like. You can say whatever you want to say. You can. My only request is this. Don't write a check with your mouth that your hands and feet can't cash. If you're going to say something like that, you have to be prepared for the backlash, which might be physical, it might be monetary, it might be socially, it might be academically, it might even be as it pertains to relationally, how people deal with you. People that were once in a relationship now know what you think. You can say what you want, but as a Christian, we should consider communities. We should consider people we say we care about. Because Christians wouldn't violate that. Christians wouldn't overstep that or overreach that. Well, that's my TED Talk for today, or my yellow tape talk. But I want you to think about that. We're living in a culture where we're paying people and we're making them famous for dishonor and disrespect. And I want to talk about that. And for black people, listen, there are certain words that we probably should not use at all because of the historicity of that word. And that's something we got to work out within ourselves. Truth be told, the word might go away when you start calling the folk who like to call you that name. Just a thought. Love y'all, man. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you for tuning in for Yellow Tape. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, make sure you share, let people know that Yellow Tape is a thing, and I'll see you next time. Thank you for tuning in to the Yellow Tape Podcast. You can find us literally everywhere at Kevin Duhart on all social media platforms. I look forward to your support. Make sure you like, subscribe, and to share. Make sure you share this with as many people you think could benefit from these conversations. Again, thank you for supporting the Yellow Tape Podcast. I'm Kevin Duhart, and I'll see you soon.